Hello, Salam. I'm Noura, and I just want to give my input on the book Let Her Fly, A Father's Journey by Ziaddiun Yousefzai. I can't pronounce names. But if you recognize the last name, you'll know that it is Malala, the great young Nobel Prize winner's father. So I really and thoroughly enjoyed this book. Granted, I did not read Malala's book, I Am Malala, so I think if I would have read that, I would have gotten more of a full picture, but you could really tell that he cares so much about his daughter and his family, and it was really interesting to see that he said, I was a feminist before I even knew what the word feminist was. And it's really interesting too. I think a lot of times we think feminists, we think crazy people, crazy, not shaving their armpits, burning their bras. And the reality is there's so many obstacles for women and girls just based on their gender. And he has been a proponent of education his whole life, which was really interesting to see that both father and daughter are activists. And with that too, there were some parts that I really enjoyed. I really liked in the beginning when he was talking about his childhood. He named off all of his sisters' names because he had said, I had never seen them have their name written in their childhood. I don't know if that's the exact quote, but that's kind of the gist of it. And it's crazy to think how one person's gender really affects their quality of life, their expectations in society, and how their life path changes. So most of this book takes place in Pakistan, and he talks about Pakistan, like he talks about how it was in his childhood as he grew up, as the tea organization. I don't want to say their actual name, but if you're familiar with recent Pakistani news and history, you know the group I'm talking about, and how they impacted the life in Pakistan. So, the father has been into education his whole life. As a young kid, he suffered with stammering and stuttering, and he went from place to place trying to fix it, from people who read him Quran to people to just practicing saying things. But it's so amazing. He had this stammering and stuttering problem, and yet he competed in talking and speaking competitions and won prizes. It's really remarkable. And let's see what else. Also, I really like how his wife, Turpakai, I don't know, please excuse my pronunciations, how he views her as a partner of equal and not just my spouse. In the book, he talks about how in Pakistan, how women, they don't really have their own independence. They're valued based on their role in society. So, for example, Mustafa's wife, or Ahmed's mother, or so-and-so's sister, or so it's so-and-so somebody, as opposed to just having them as their name. And so a lot of, for example, when they were out walking about, Pakistan, they would walk side by side. And I think from maybe Westerners who aren't aware, you know, you might think, oh, they're walking side by side. Why is that considered an act of, you know, bravery or, you know, compassion? And so, like, typically the men would walk ahead of their woman and their wife would walk several feet behind. So even things like that was really interesting to see that. And even like when him and Torpakai would have guests over at their house, he didn't request his wife to cover her face, which is tradition there in Pakistan that I guess the way he described it is that if you go to visit someone, the wife typically covers her face in her home and things like that. So it was really interesting to see, and they ran a school together too. And in the school too, you know, it was for obviously for students, but Torpakai a lot of times would just let people enroll and kind of just skim over their tuition and fees, because there would be parents calling saying, oh, we can't afford it. And there was a part in the book where he talked about, like, oh, like our someone from the administration would get upset. It's like, we don't have the funds for this. And she's all like, oh, well, no, it's okay. Like, they still need an education. So I really love that part. Another thing that struck me too is that this book was really good. So I probably should have organized this a little bit better. So, and also, like, he talks about, obviously, his role as a father and how he was raised, and then his expectations with his sons and his daughter, Malala. And what was really cool, so he was saying they had a family book where they would write down all the names of the family members, so so-and-so, son of this, brother of that. But, however, it was only of the male family members. So, when his daughter Malala was born, he made a point to write down Malala's name in the family tree, which was just a beautiful gesture in its own, and I really liked that. And he said some family members were upset, but then one of the family members that was upset later on had a daughter that went to university, and so it's so funny how that kind of worked out. And I mean, so obviously too, we're talking about Malala, and we know that she got shot by the T group. Not gonna say them. And during that time, so prior to that, him and Malala would actually do a lot of activism within their region and about education and letting girls go to school and things like that. And he kept saying, oh, well, the T group, they don't, they've never killed a woman or a girl. They don't kill children. And so that's why he kind of kept the activism going prior to the shooting. And this is what he says. As people around me became silent, I spoke more. I shouted my message over the squares of Mangora, from page 137. Mangora was just the area that they're from. And also, like, during this time, this was around 2009, schools, 400 400 schools were bombed, and girls' education was banned by the Tea Group in January of 2009. And this affected 50,000 schoolgirls just in the Swat Valley alone, let alone other areas. But it's so obviously this forced them to move to England, and now Malala is a graduate of Oxford University too. And so obviously this, affected their lives greatly, this shooting, and she nearly lost her life, and miraculously with the help of the doctors, her life was spared. But this is what Malala says about the shooting. So this is a few years later. When I hear the stories that there's a girl named Malala who was shot by the T, it's just a story of me. I just don't link it to my life at all. And then she says too, weakness, fear, and hopelessness died. Strength, power, and courage were born. I am the same. And then she also goes on to say that I was the girl that fought. So it's really, it's so intriguing to see how sexism and how sexism has really forced them to become activists. I know Malala had once said, my story isn't really unique. My story is just like thousands of other girls, and it really helps you put education, particularly girls' education, into the question. For me personally, I've never had to fight for my education. Going to school was just expected and the norm. And there's so many girls around the world who have these cultural oppressions that don't allow them to really grow and be their own. And when girls are educated, they bring so much more to the community because they're not viewed as a burden. They're not just so-and-so's somebody, so-and-so's spouse, daughter, sister, etc., etc. They're their own person. So I'm going to just end this video on a quote that he wrote about his daughter. Ask me not what I did, but I did not do. I did not clip her wings. I wanted her to let her fly high in the sky, not scratch around in a dusty courtyard grounded by social norms. And I would stand by her, protecting her until she had the confidence and strength to fly high herself, no longer in need of my protection. And yeah, so that's my thoughts on this book. I really recommend it, and it really gives you a perspective about lack of girls' education around the world, and to really push for that, because girls having rights to education is a human right. Education for kids is a human right, and no culture is a culture doesn't determine someone's freedom, if that makes sense. So I'm going to end it on that. Thank you for joining me today. And I hope that you took something from this video.